Hi there. Welcome to the Imperfect Prophet podcast for women who wonder. Frankly, as we go through life, I'm sure we wonder about a great deal. First as little kids, then as adolescents, then as young women, then as transitional women. What are we calling ourselves these days? And then you get to this point in life, or my point in life, when you're postmenopausal and wondering what's next. Wondering if the parade already passed you by. Join me, Wonder Wendy. I'm going to be your host as we talk about some of these unique challenges that face women today in a new millennium, going through menopause and trying to live a rich, full life. There might even be a few men and younger women that want to listen in too. That's okay. But there's a roller coaster and we're all on it. And I'm going to be your guide to help you figure out when you should close your eyes, when you should hang on, and maybe we'll explore some ideas for what works for you if it doesn't work for me, or vice versa. So join the conversation, pick up your favorite beverage, and we'll talk to you soon. Welcome to the Imperfect Prophet.
Hey there. Welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Prophet. Oh, this just isn't any other episode. This is episode 100. I have to remember that. It's episode 100, the centenary mark. It's a big deal. Celebrate, celebrate. But today I want to talk about an encounter with a friend a couple weeks ago. Skip and I were catching up with an old friend. We knew we were going to run into him eventually. We were both at the same event. But when we saw him, we were surprised because he was walking with a cane. And walking with great difficulty. And I'm going to be careful not to call him an old friend because he's about my age. I mean, this is not an old man, at least not in my book. 60 isn't old, is it, people? But here he was struggling to walk with a cane. And, he's never been the picture of health. I will admit that honestly, but this seemed pretty extreme. Well, he told us he'd been in such discomfort that he'd finally gone to the doctor, because we all know that men love to go to the doctor and they go there as soon as they can. No, they don't. So it must have been pretty bad because he decided to go to the doctor. And the doctor identified the problem with great ease: years of misalignment. His feet weren't supporting his body properly and everything above them had been thrown out of whack. Now I looked down and noted that his weight was mostly on the outer edges of his feet, and so not properly distributed. The doctor had prescribed essentially braces, something more orthotic than that, but basically braces. Simple enough. But then he said something that really stayed with me. The braces hurt, he complained, and I'm pain averse, he joked. And I walked away puzzled. Wait a minute. He's already hurting. He has enough pain that he needs a cane to walk. And it's affecting his quality of life enough that a guy who doesn't like going to the doctor actually went to the doctor. It's pain that makes him say no to things that could bring him happiness because his mobility is impaired. So, isn't the question not whether he'll hurt, because he's already hurting? The question is whether he's willing to trade familiar pain for temporary discomfort and the possibility of something better. And standing there, I realized that maybe that's really true for all of us, because you don't get to choose pain or no pain. You get to choose which pain. I'm going to be honest with you. A few years ago, I was suffering too. Not bad enough to need a cane, but I was beginning to notice things that didn't feel quite right. By now, if you've been listening, you know I love the theater. But I'd go to a performance, and by the end, I was very uncomfortable, and standing up after the show was difficult. Another weird thing was I found myself getting out of breath climbing stairs, even though I was walking 10,000 steps a day. How could that be? What was wrong? Another weird thing was I had difficulty swallowing. Just wasn't constant, but when it went wrong, it felt like I was choking a little bit. And then there was the realization that my throat hurt after talking for a little bit or singing for extended periods. And I'm not talking filibuster levels speaking, not hours and hours, just a long, normal conversation or normal amounts of singing that hadn't been a problem so long before. Nothing dramatic per se. Nothing that sent me to an emergency room. Nothing that would have alarmed anyone else. I don't think anyone else even noticed. Just enough to make me wonder what was going on. And if I'm going to be honest with you, I was frightened. There were a lot of strange little symptoms, and those are just the tip of the iceberg. And I'd witnessed the toll of multiple sclerosis and quietly wondered if that might be the case for me as well. I was so afraid that I told no one. Yes, as much as I mock my friend who didn't go to the doctor until he was in extreme pain, I didn't want to voice what was going on for fear that it would somehow make it more real. So, like a lot of people, I adapted and accepted what was happening as normal. After all, I'm getting older. This was happening when I was in my early 50s. Maybe that's just part of the deal. I mean, we all talk about the aches and pains of aging. So aren't we supposed to hurt a little bit more? Have we preconditioned ourselves to accept that? And breathing a little harder, oh well, again, doesn't that happen to everybody? But it was also starting to surrender some of the things I love. That bothered me. It was nothing dramatic, though, and the slow acceptance that decline was inevitable was kind of creeping on me. I have to admit it. I don't always have a positive outlook. And like I said, this was a few years ago before I embraced the bucket list life. Then something unexpected happened. A friend, and I'm going to use that term lovingly, she practically bullied me into trying Bikram yoga. Now, this woman is no longer part of my life, which is a reminder that not every person we're grateful for is meant to walk beside us forever. But I will always be thankful that she refused to accept my no as an answer. Now, she was talking about hot yoga. I mean, this woman must be crazy. Working out in that kind of heat sounded like a recipe for death. For 90 minutes. Yeah, this sounded like madness. I wanted absolutely no part of it. And honestly, when I extol the virtues of my Bikram yoga practice, I see that same look in people's faces, and I totally understand why they feel that way. And she did tell me how she had experienced tremendous relief from that practice. And she told me to stop, she wouldn't stop talking about it until I gave in. And I actually went saying, I'm going to prove to you I hate yoga. I hate yoga classes. I can't stand the hot. Nope, not going to happen. But honestly, her relentless optimism, pressure, idea, notion, push, felt less like friendship and more like an interrogation technique. So finally, I did go. And in that first class, I discovered just how bound up my body had become. I also found out something else. By the end of those 90 minutes, I could breathe just a little bit better. Not perfectly, not magically, not a silver bullet cure, but noticeably different. So I bought a membership just for a couple of weeks, or maybe it was a month. was a cheap intro. But I knew something had shifted, and I kept going. Trust me, I was not an enlightened yogi. I certainly didn't love every minute of it. There were classes where I only managed 1 out of 3 sets of postures. And eventually I worked my way up to every other posture. Progress wasn't exactly linear. Some days I could do almost everything. Then the next day, my tired body would remind me to slow down. Truthfully, that still happens to a certain extent. Some days it still hurts. Some mornings begin with stiffness and a heating pad before the coffee is even finished brewing. But I keep going because I caught a glimpse of something better. A glimpse of what life could feel like when my body isn't constantly compensating. And within a few months, something else had changed. The pain felt different. It no longer felt like I was slipping into decline. It felt like I was moving toward something. And perhaps that's the difference. Pain that marks decline feels very different from pain that accompanies restoration. And sometimes that's all hope really is. Not certainty, not perfection. Just that glimpse to keep going. Now, let me digress a little bit because, I love to tell a story that weaves into a story, that weaves into another story, and in the end, it all makes sense. In a past life, I managed a pack and ship store. I actually took training in packing and shipping, so I know way, way, way too much about boxes. But for this discussion, I'm going to keep it where you don't need to have had any training. You know those cardboard boxes that have been sitting in the garage, maybe for years? When they were new, their edges are perfectly angled at 90 degrees. The pile stands straight and everything lines up. But after years of carrying weight, something changes. The corners soften and the sides begin to bow and maybe crinkle a little bit. Those sharp angles may become creased. And that bottom box may bulge because it doesn't have the strength to support the weight above it. Before long, the whole stack begins to lean like the Leaning Tower of Pisa because the boxes at the bottom can no longer support the ones above. Oh, and quite frankly, our bodies, our spines, aren't that much different. Years of carrying heavy loads, bad posture, slumping, stress, gravity. Gravity, that thing that keeps us from floating into space, also slowly compresses our bodies if we don't fight against it. And let's not even talk about the habits that are repeated so often they become muscle memory. Clenched shoulders. Again, the bad postures. Whatever. Anyway, just like those boxes, eventually our angles aren't quite 90 degrees anymore. And one of the miracles of the human body is our ability to keep going even when things aren't running properly. Those achy hips, which had plagued me in the theater, they were so much like that bulging box at the bottom of the pile, malfunctioning, stretching in the wrong way, yet still carrying the load. And those small imbalances down below created pain almost everywhere else. Now, 7 years into my yoga practice, hitting 7 years of yoga practice, I'm still learning. Some days my body reminds me that 60 is definitely not 20. But I no longer experience the symptoms that once frightened me. Not the breathlessness, not the swallowing issues, not the throat pain. The rewards from my slow and steady and occasionally painful yoga practice are extraordinary. And over time, I realized that bodies aren't the only things that compensate. Oh, this one's tough. Even tougher than physical pain. Because like my friend who physically needed his cane, we learned to walk with emotional canes. Yeah. What's your cane? Resentment? Isolation? Keeping busy so you never have to think? Pain relievers? Prescribed over the counter? Alcohol? Recreational drugs? Or just the comforting crutch of good enough? We all have them. Things we lean on, things that help us compensate, things that allow us to keep moving without addressing what's really wrong. And the funny thing about canes is that nobody wants one. Well, okay, if you're wearing a top hat and tails, having a cane looks pretty dapper, but other than that, nobody really wants one. People use them because they need them, because something underneath isn't working the way it should. And sometimes our emotional canes, well, they do serve a purpose. They help us get through difficult times. They help us survive. The problem comes when survival becomes a permanent lifestyle. When the thing that helped us through becomes the thing that is keeping us stuck. Most of us don't wake up one morning and completely change our lives. We don't throw away our canes in a dramatic moment of transformation. You are healed. No, we set them down, one choice at a time. Finally, having that conversation. Starting that new one healthy habit. Maybe one act of courage. One difficult truth. One uncomfortable change. Remember, the goal isn't to avoid pain. Nobody said it was. It's to stop using compensation as a substitute for healing. To let go of the pain that is keeping us stuck. And embrace the discomfort that helps us become something better. Because there is another kind of pain. Not all pain serves the same purpose. There are good kinds of pain. The soreness after yoga, that you know you've done good work, and you need to slowly stretch that out. The ache that comes from rebuilding. I've heard people say that knee replacement surgery is life-changing. Now, what they don't always tell you, but I've heard repeatedly, is that the physical therapy afterward, which is essential to proper recovery, can be more painful than the surgery itself. Who signs up for that? And yet, who wants to live with the pain that made the surgery necessary in the first place? So how about that difficult conversation? Who wants to have a difficult conversation? Absolutely no one. Okay, occasionally I do because I know it's the shortest way through. But it seems very few other people do. Because if you don't have that conversation, you can spend years living in tension, resentment, and the uneasy feeling that something important has gone unsaid. How about the pain of trying something new or learning something new? You may look like a beginner. You may risk looking foolish. It might be uncomfortable initially. Nobody wants that. But who wants to stop growing? Who wants grief? None of us. Yet love and loss have always traveled together. And becoming someone new requires stretching. Changing habits is part of the deal. Letting go makes room for the new. Starting over with a fresh perspective might be exactly what you need. Is it time to admit that I need help? None of that is easy. It can all hurt. But boy, can it lead to a different place. Some pain whispers, this is just how it is. And some pain says, this will be good. Keep going. You don't get to choose pain or no pain. You get to choose which pain. And I don't want the pain of staying stuck, or the pain of resentment, or the pain of isolation, or the pain of saying good enough when my soul quietly begs for more. I want healing. And if that's uncomfortable, if that's painful, that's okay. Not too long ago, I was watching an interview with Keith Richards, from the Rolling Stones, and they asked if there was a secret to his longevity. He joked that if there was one, he wouldn't share it. Then he shrugged and he said, you just keep going. Now, if anyone has earned the right to offer advice on longevity, it might be Keith Richards, who defies all probability. But I do suspect that's true for more than rock stars. We have to keep going. Not because life is painless, not because aging is effortless, not because healing is easy. We keep going because becoming stronger is worth the effort. Growth is worth the discomfort. And the alternative is to slowly shrink in our world. Maybe that's part of the wonderful bucket list life. Not collecting experiences, not checking boxes, not pretending life is always easy. It's not. But continuing to grow, continuing to learn, continuing to heal. Oh, and say yes to the possibilities still waiting for us, even when it hurts a little. This week, as this 100th episode drops, it's celebration in its own right, the United States will celebrate Independence Day and our nation's 250th birthday. Independence. Yeah, there's political independence, and the formation of this country is certainly worth celebrating. But what about celebrating your personal independence? The ability to move freely, the freedom to grow, the freedom to change, the freedom to stop carrying pain that no longer serves us. Perhaps one of the greatest freedoms we possess is the freedom to choose which pain we're willing to live with. Freedom isn't the absence of struggle. History proved that 250 years ago. Freedom is having the courage to choose the struggle that leads us somewhere better. Perhaps independence shouldn't be something we celebrate once a year. Perhaps it's something we reclaim one difficult choice at a time. Whether it's that conversation, the habit, the act of courage, or the decision to stop compensating and start healing. And that makes me wonder, what if some of the pain you've been trying to avoid isn't a sign something is wrong? What if it's evidence that your healing is ready to begin? Or perhaps it's already begun. If this message made you think of someone, as always, don't keep it to yourself. share the link with a friend, and/or get together and listen with a friend. And until we talk again next week, keep wondering, stay hydrated, and happy Independence Day.
Like what you heard here today? Then we should be friends. I suggest you join my Facebook group. It's a good way to connect. We can have a conversation, ask me questions, whatever you want to do. It is called the Wonderful Bucket List Life. That's Wonder-Full Bucket List Life. Be a bucket lister and join me on this adventure. Or you can go to my webpage, which is Wonder Wendy and Friends, join the mailing list, learn about the book I wrote, adventures that are coming up in the future, and other podcasts. I look forward to talking to you soon, and stay hydrated. Have a great day.